It's been a while, over 4 years since INFRA released its third act, and over a year since the last major open sewer update. But last month, more content for INFRA was released in the form of a fan mod called INFRA Underground. This mod has had quite a turbulent history. The first form of INFRA Underground started as a mod called Remnants of the Old World, announced in June 2020. Remnants was worked on for a while, but the mod would never release, being cancelled in May 2021 for a variety of reasons. However, not all hope was lost for a fan mod, as INFRA Underground was shortly announced, a scaled-down mod recycling a lot of the content made for Remnants. The mod would release on the 13th of June 2022, just under 2 years from the initial announcement of Remnants. Underground would become the second INFRA fan mod to release, the first of course being Down. Underground is set sometime after the events of INFRA. The exact date is not stated, but some clues suggest it's sometime between the 28th of September and the 6th of October of 2016, and explores unseen areas of Stahlberg, where Mark is called to survey damage done to a house by flooding, and quickly gets involved in a hidden conspiracy involving those ever-elusive green mushrooms. I'm not going to spoil the story in this video, but I will say that the story does mainly do its own thing, besides a few references to the main game. Which in my opinion was a smart move, as the mod is free to explore its own themes without stepping on INFRA's story, which was already well explored. Similar to INFRA however, the story is presented in much the same way, with various documents, audio tapes, and the occasional background detail, every detail raising more questions than answers, just as it should. The documents themselves are very high quality, taking heavy inspiration from those in the main game. There is also a mystic side. INFRA had more nebulous aspects to its story, mainly Stahlberg Underground, Morco, Ugu, and the Raven Research Institute. Some of this stuff does appear in Underground, and I don't think it does it as well as in INFRA. Morco appears pretty early on in the game. His first main appearance in Chapter 2 depicts him as more of an obstacle that hinders your presence. This use of Morco, I believe, diminishes a lot of what makes him great. Just being able to look at him for as long as you want makes him a lot less scary, and even the jump scare he gives you wears off after failing once. It's a shame, since this mod does introduce some really effective sightings that puts you on your guard with just a second of music to accompany the sighting of a black figure. Despite my gripes about Morco in this mod, the gameplay of this mod is actually pretty good, despite the fact that puzzles can often be summarized with find blocked path, find object to unblock path, unblock path. Whether that's a locked door or a gas leak in front of a hallway, however. Underground finds a way to keep this gameplay loop unique every time, often putting the player in a room with multiple of these puzzles overlapping each other, and keeping the solutions varied, either with finding coins to unlock a pay toilet, or just regular keys and valves. INFRA's puzzles were similar in this way, but with more variety. Often the player had to manage large machines, and the game would introduce large set pieces. But it's understandable that Underground doesn't have as large of a scope, so don't expect the puzzles to take the shape of a coffee machine or a crane you have to operate. I do have one complaint, however. There's a puzzle in Chapter 2 that I don't think applies itself very well. There's a pool of electrified water. You'd think the solution is to find a way to shut off the electricity, and I spent a while on my first playthrough looking for a way to shut it down, because that's the kind of thing you'd do in INFRA, and Underground seemed to follow that trend. But instead, the solution was to jump over the electrified pool. Unless that wasn't intended, there was actually a way to shut off the power that I didn't find. Nonetheless, one thing that Underground really excels at is the atmosphere, following after INFRA extraordinarily. The first map, The House, is amazing in this regard. The pattering of the rain while you explore this large building, slowly uncovering its secrets. The experience is expanded when you notice small details, like a security camera in the corner of the room, or the fact that the door that was locked on the first floor is somehow open.
Still 8 packs of batteries left.
I thoroughly believe that this singular map can go up against the best that INFRA has to offer. Apparently there's also a Morco sighting in that map, but I haven't found it yet. I even rambled about how much I love the map back in August last year when I saw some early screenshots. You can just tell that it's the part of the game they work the hardest on. Even the music that plays when you go to the garden is great as you look out over the ocean with the tiny lights of the rest of the city on the other side of the bay. The rest of the game is good too. Most of the game is set underground, as the name implies, and you'll never forget it too. Dingy corridors, abandoned metro stations, and secluded offices, all supplemented with enough hidden details to make you question whether or not you're really alone. There is of course humour. What was great about INFRA was how seamlessly it fused humour into serious topics, like homelessness and drug abuse, but still knowing when to take its themes seriously. Underground follows by having some humour thrown into the background. The Osmo Olude references are great, but a lot of Underground's humour comes from the insane amount of rubber ducks everywhere. I was constantly impressed with how many times the devs managed to throw a rubber duck into almost any environment. It may not have as much depth as INFRA's humour. There isn't any reference to mad alcoholics writing notes about how much they love mini-trains, but Underground seems to take a more serious approach anyway, sometimes reaching levels that wouldn't go amiss in a horror game. Underground also has some of its own unique music, including remixes of INFRA's classic soundtrack. These new songs are great and are often used better than when the game tries to recycle the main game's soundtrack. There's one section where the song Reactor 1 plays, a song was played in INFRA during a time section, placing me under a false sense of security, expecting my time to be limited at the next gameplay section, which of course it wasn't. There were also some issues where songs would immediately stop playing when I exited a certain area, which broke immersion. Despite all its flaws, INFRA Underground is a pretty good mod, with lots of love and talent behind it. It may not be the longest fan game ever with just over an hour of content, but it is perfectly free if you already own INFRA, so if you're a fan of the game, you should not miss out this mod. 8 out of 10, not enough ducks.